My name is Melanie Davis, and I am the founder of Triumph Press, an indie publishing company that helps to preserve the stories that can make a difference in the world, mostly nonfiction and self help. I had the honor and opportunity to publish a book recently titled A Boy from Cracker's Neck, which are the epic stories of a B 17 bomber pilot and his crew, as told by his grandson, who listened to his papa tell his stories as they worked together on a dairy farm up in the Appalachian Mountains. His name is John W. Peace, and John's book went to number one as a hot new release on Amazon and a number one best-selling book. John is the co-host of this show, Masters of the Air Talks. Hi, John.
Hello, Melanie. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm very honored to be a co-host. You're talking, that was such a wonderful and elegant introduction, and I sure do appreciate it. I was just thinking about, and you were talking about my papa and his stories, give the viewers just a little bit of background. Growing up on a family dairy farm, when you spend 6 to 8 hours a day, and this was 7 days a week, milking cows with someone, and to put in a little bit of context, you're in the milking parlor, you had the cows that come in and out, you had the equipment, and we had a little radio in the background. But mainly, the only entertainment for 8 hours a day was talking and hearing stories. And a lot of these stories that I wrote about in A Boy from Cracker's Neck are just these stories that I heard over and over. A lot of times my granddad's peers, people he grew up with, were also World War II veterans, would come by the milking parlor. And one thing I did put in the book, I didn't grow up hearing war stories per se. I did hear stories about growing up. And in the book, I talk about I was almost in high school, in fact, my first year in high school, before I ever heard the first war story. And then
That's amazing.
yeah,
That's
and of
amazing.
course we know now PTSD. Back
Mhm.
then they just called it shell shock and stuff like that. All these veterans were suffering from some form and fashion of it, and some degree of it. And as my granddad kind of came around in older age, a lot of these other men did too. So the stories started coming out, and they weren't bravado or ego.
Yeah.
I think they really just didn't want the stories to die with them, and they didn't want to let and a lot of it, kind of explained their personalities, kind of explained, who they were. Most of them had never talked about it. So, when we started talking about this episode, I got real excited about just making a comparison with Band of Brothers, which is one of my favorite miniseries of all time. My granddad was still alive. He lived to 2015. So in 2001, when Band of Brothers came out, we kind of watched it together. And then of course some of the World War II veterans that would come by the farm. Some of them were actually in some of the battles. Bertel Stallard,
Wow.
one of my, he was actually in that battle. So to hear them talk about how accurate, the movie miniseries Band of Brothers was, and then hopefully, and we know with Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg, the Masters of the Air is going to be great, but Band of Brothers is a high bar to try to maintain.
To
Uh,
recreate in the sense. And I think that's a good segue into just the fact that this is our first episode of
yes.
Masters of the Air Talks. So please excuse us if we appear a little awkward as we're just launching into this adventure that we've been talking about for some months now. Sure, your book was released last October, I believe it was.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, October of 2023, and so right now it's January of 2024, and we're really looking forward to and anticipating the airing of Masters of the Air, which is a series similar to Band of Brothers, made by the same producer, Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks, producers, I should say. And so to kind of kick off what our goals are, which is just to create a community that can come together and have conversations around the film and just around this time of our history, and specifically focusing on aviation during World War II, the bomber groups, and just life during that time. So we thought it would be a fun way to kick off our whole purpose by doing a comparison and a contrast between the trailers of Band of Brothers, which is the first series, really, I think
Hmm.
that was produced around a war, around a book, Stephen Ambrose's book titled Band of Brothers. And of course, this film that's about to come out is around a book of the same title as the film, Masters of the Air, by Dennis Miller, who is a professor. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But to set up the trailer for Band of Brothers, do you want to give us kind of some fun facts
Yeah,
about that
I mean,
that series?
uh, first and foremost, I'm feeling my age when I think about Band of Brothers came out in 2001 and over 20 years ago. Oh my gosh, I was trying to think, how young my son was, the different stages in my life and of course your life and everybody else, 20 some years ago. And to give that in context, I was looking up like historical facts of 2001. One, that was the year the iPod came out, not the iPhone. And
Oh, wow.
I don't even know if my daughter, who's 20 years old, even knows what an iPod is. She definitely knows what an iPhone is.
That
And
just shows how fast the technology is
yes, and
changing.
think about this
Yeah.
miniseries came out almost 7 years before the iPhone.
Wow.
And so and then 2001 was the first year, the first Harry Potter movie. It's hard to believe those have been around 20 some years now.
Yeah.
And then of course, excuse me, Band of Brothers aired on September 9th. And then of course I think everybody knows what happened 2 days later. And I actually looked up that date. I can remember watching the first episode of Band of Brothers with my granddad on a Sunday night, and that was September 9th.
Mhm.
And then, of course, we know what happened on Tuesday, September 11th. And, they were talking
So
about,
ironic that it would
yes,
be the first, the first episode of that series right at that event that really kicked off one of our next major wars.
yes.
Um, that's very significant, I think.
And on some of the facts on Band of Brothers of how popular it was, they had a viewership of around 10 million viewers, and this was HBO, and it was a premium subscription channel. And of
Yeah.
course, at the time, it was the biggest premium subscription.
And now we have how many
Oh,
subscription
I
channels?
know.
Just
So
tell the difference between then and now. That was the first one, I think.
yeah,
Maybe
and
Showtime was right there with them, but
and you and
yeah.
I, we've had a mini conversation of how big will Masters of the Air be being on Apple
Mhm.
TV and being a stream, pay for streaming service. So, a little bit of that we'll wait and find out what happens and stuff. I'm gonna read off just a little bit to the viewers about exactly how great a show Band of Brothers was, in case that we got new viewers and younger viewers. 20 years ago, so and, if
Yeah.
you'd be 25, 30 years old, you may never have watched Band of Brothers unless you've had an interest. So, at the time, and we've talked about it being critically acclaimed, won Emmys, it won Golden Globe Awards for Best Miniseries. And, to really summarize what Band of Brothers was, it was based on the book Band of Brothers. And it's a history of Easy Company, which was the 2nd Battalion. I'm going to read this off so I get it correct, of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment of the 101st Airborne Division. And the movie and the book starts out with training camp. So these men have entered the service to fight in World War II. And this is pretty much where the book and the miniseries begins. And everything. So, Matt, I kind of leave it up to you from here on
All
out
right.
as we get into the
Well,
trailer.
let's bring up the trailer and we'll watch that and we can talk about it afterwards. I'll add that to the stage.
It's been 2 years since I seen home. 2 years. It's fucking war.
At 0600 hours, we will begin training to go to war.
This is not Dog Company. This is Easy Company. The first and finest company in this regiment.
Each trooper will learn this operation by heart and know his mission to the detail.
We're invading Europe, my friend.
All you have to do is remember what you were taught. I guarantee you gravity will take care of the rest.
We are on the eve of the largest action in the history of warfare.
It's Normandy.
We all do our jobs. Everything will be fine.
Scared.
We're all scared.
What made you decide to join the paratroopers?
Fire!
I wanted to fight with the best, sir.
Tonight, we're gonna have to cross the river.
Those crowds are gonna catch some hell.
We're gonna have to find another way into Germany.
Easy, you'll head up the mountain through the Obersalzberg. Take the Eagle's Nest.
Man, it's been a long war. It's been a tough war. You fought bravely, proudly for your country. You are a special group. You found in one another a bond that exists only in combat.
Wow.
So,
One of the things I mentioned before, and you could tell how much money was spent on Band of Brothers. And I forgot to talk about this before. At that time in 2001, that was the most expensive. Over $100 million, $110 million was spent to produce Band of Brothers. But the one thing I will say, it still shows that they spent it wisely because it's aged very well. It still looks very fresh and stuff. So,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
to
And a
watch it,
lot of the
still hard to
actors.
believe it's 20 years old. You know.
Oh gosh, I agree. I'm just as excited to watch it, and I've seen it multiple times because I'm one of those war fans. Just I find the stories that come from war are the greatest because there's so much that they face, and I think that's what these trailers show. They show the opposition that they face and the real danger, and yet they push through it, and they're brave. They're scared,
Yes.
but yet they go forward. I think that's the description of courage. It's not to have any fear, to have no fear, but it's to love who you're serving and to love your cause enough to just run into that battle. And that's what you see in these trailers. I really feel it when I watch them. And of course, knowing that these are telling the true stories, these are not made up stories. Some stories, some movies you watch about Hollywood are completely made up, and that's fine because they're still catching the actual equipment of the time or the strategies of the time. But to watch these films and say, that Dick Winters, he was actually a man who did these very things.
Oh, and you know, one of my favorite things about Band of Brothers was I can't even was it at the beginning of the episode or at the end where they did the personal interviews with the actual veterans.
Right. Yeah, that
And
was
just them talking.
I don't know that they did that with Masters of the Air, and it's probably because it's made so many years later.
Well, yeah, I mean the
Most of
veteran
them probably not
unfortunately,
even
yeah,
on to interview.
yeah,
I think that points out what a blessing it was that they made it when they did, so that they could have those interviews. Because I agree, and it's amazing too when you watch those interviews. The actors that they selected very much reflect the physical appearance of the men that they are portraying.
yes.
I'm sure that they did that on purpose in so many of those instances, and yet those actors, many of them went on to become famous actors, but at the time there was only a few that you'd maybe ever seen before.
Yeah, one of
And
the footnotes of Band of Brothers, because it was so expensive to save money, was they didn't hire any famous people. So
Yeah.
they were saving money on hiring at the time no name, but no, they were talented. They knew they were talented, but they were no
Yes.
name actors and actresses, and so
And
they were
I
saving
prefer
money.
that. I
Yeah,
actually prefer that because if it's somebody you've seen in multiple movies, sometimes it's hard to disconnect that actor from having played another role. And I think it made it that much more realistic to be watching
that's a good
people
point.
that look like the person they're portraying. And you could see that because when you're watching those interviews, as you talked about, you go, "Oh, he actually looks like the guy that's,
Ah,
Garnier, for example." I think I forget the actor's name who played Garnier, but he really looked like him,
yeah.
and it just made me enjoy the show that much more.
Well, I'm
So,
glad you brought that up because I was just
yeah.
thinking about if you've ever watched the movie Thin Red Line, and it had an all-star cast, had Ted Danson,
Mm.
George Clooney, Woody Harrelson, but so many times you see a famous actor, I don't know, you know who he is. You know
Yeah,
who
it
George
just
Clooney is
takes
or
a
Ted
little bit away
Danson.
from it.
Yeah, and
So
and they did
no
it
too
wonderful.
many movie producers who
Yeah.
may ever watch our show. Always use people we've never seen before. And actually, that's a conversation we're going to have after we watch the Masters of the Air trailer. So let me go ahead and bring up the next trailer here.
What's the move? We lead our boys through.
So you're happy?
A girl worth riding to is hard to find.
Not if you know where to look.
I'll miss you every second.
Major Egan, you were the first pilot assigned to the 100th.
Me and Buck Levin.
You are in charge of 35 planes and 350 air crewmen.
Don't you die on me before I get over there.
Something big is brewing.
The 8th will be sending up the largest air armada ever assembled in the history of mankind.
Straight into Hitler's territory.
We need complete and total air superiority. That's the mission.
What?
You might be the last pretty face I ever see.
What's the move? We lead our boys through it.
All that we do, day in, day out, does something to a guy, doesn't it?
We're here to fight the monsters. The things these people are capable of. And they got it coming. Trust me.
Lord, guard and guide the men who fly through the great spaces of the sky.
Are we Tuskegee men or what?
Sir, yes, sir! Be with them traversing the air in darkening storms or sunshine fair.
I think we may be done. We are going to sit here and take it. We're going to stick with our mission as long as we can fly.
We won't go without a fight.
Wow.
All right.
One thing, first knee-jerk reaction. I mean, you can tell Apple has spent, I think what they said, $250 to $300 million on this production. And, even in the trailer, you can see the movie quality and the special effects. You can tell it's going to have a lot of action.
Makes me wish that I was one of the lucky ones that had an in-home theater, because you're going to want this up on as big a screen as you can get it with surround sound to just feel like you're up there in the skies. You can tell it's one of those films that really belongs in the theater to be seen with all of the impact that they spent that money to achieve. And I'm so glad that they did. I think this movie is going to have the same longevity that Band of Brothers has had. And although, because like you said, back when HBO first launched, there weren't a lot of the subscription channels, and kind of it was a new thing too. And all eyes were on it. I don't know if they're going to have the same immediate audience for this film, because there's so many subscription channels who are making series and films like this. But
yeah, and one thing we hadn't talked about, and I actually saw another YouTube video on this, with Band of Brothers, they kind of caught lightning in a bottle, because remember, in 2001, it's only 5 years after Saving Private Ryan. And, it swept all the Oscars. Yeah. And so you still had a lot of that movie-going people who were still interested in more World War II stories. So, and then, I think 1996 is when Saving Private Ryan comes out. And then also, even before then, Spielberg had the, Schindler's List. So you had, kind of some major movies come out about World War II, the Holocaust, and then of course HBO's epic miniseries 2001 with Band of Brothers. One thing we have talked about a little bit is about the book Masters of the Air. I know we're reading it together. They could not have picked a better book for a reference. I will hand it to Professor Miller in writing that book. He put some time and effort into the book.
I think the word reference is a really good term to use and about that book. it's not full of stories as much as it's full of information. So it's really it's probably a comprehensive guide to the bomber groups, and so it's great that they were able to take such an informative book and turn it into a film that's full of story, so that people will come and be excited to read a book that they might otherwise be a little bit and daunted by, because it is 600 plus pages long. And but we're enjoying it as we're reading it, so that we're ready to be able to kind of see how well the film captured what's in the book. And of course, you can never capture everything in a book, but especially in a 600 page
Yeah.
book. Yeah.
And of course, to make a good movie and make it entertaining, we know they're going to take some liberties with the story, and they got to create a story within the story.
Yeah.
Within,
Yeah.
and so I look forward to seeing that. And of course, one thing Spielberg and Hanks, had with Band of Brothers and Pacific is I think they did an excellent job in merging historically accurate filmmaking with the entertaining story. And sometimes there's a little bit of give or take in there, but I think they did a wonderful job. One thing, when you talk to veterans, I can remember after Saving Private Ryan and Band of Brothers, my granddad, some of his peers that I wrote about in A Boy from Cracker's Neck, all they could talk about was how accurate. My character in the book, Burchell Staller, was a real person, was in the invasion of Normandy. When he saw Saving Private Ryan, and I went by like a week later to talk to him about it, he said, "Son, that was it." He said, "I couldn't
Yeah.
tell you one thing that I would change." And
Yeah,
yeah,
that's remarkable, and even to get to be in the presence of those people. I noticed in this trailer that they showed a scene with the Tuskegee, and I'm so
yes,
glad that they included them, because they played such a pivotal role. And you write about the plane that they flew, help me out, the
the P-51 Mustang. Yep.
B-51 Mustang. Thank
Mhm.
you. Um, because you write in your book how until they had that escort all the way into Germany, their losses were so high.
Oh,
But
and my granddad would quote and talk about the P-51 Mustang was an angel from heaven. I
yeah.
mean, and that made all the difference in the world.
I was really glad to see in the trailer they're indicating that, yeah, we're giving attention to this part of history as well. And speaking of getting to see a movie with the actual veterans that were there, I got to see Red Tails with the I actually watched it with them in a special screening, and they loved it. I asked them afterwards what they thought of it, and they thought it was great. It was very Hollywood. They didn't seem to mind, and so I think it was just accurate enough that they didn't have a lot of criticisms of it, but they definitely called it Hollywood. So, of course, when you're out in there flying, it's for our purposes, we get to see things be exciting, and it doesn't capture, I'm sure, all the time. Even in Masters of the Air, they're not going to be able to really capture how long they had to sit in that plane, just traveling, full of fear and adrenaline, just to get to the target, and wondering if you're going to be one of those that gets shot down.
Oh,
This
yeah.
and that's just something in a fast-paced show, you can't really capture some of the hardest times, which I think are the moments where they're just sitting there either freezing or sweating in their suits,
Mhm.
depending on what altitude they were at. Um, but but your book, again, we're the reason you're part of this, that we're doing this together, is because you're truly an expert in your own right on this time period, because of hearing this story. So I think that what you bring with your book, and in contrast to Masters of the Air as a book itself,
Yes.
anyone who's enjoying that as a reference, and of course you're introduced to the characters that are in the film, but if you really want a story that's told, and you tell the stories as if you're there,
Yeah.
because you heard it so much. So it's
Yeah.
it's a little bit of historical fiction, in the sense that you're putting words into everybody's mouths, but I'm sure that's what they said, because I know you talked about your papa um, acting out the scenes as he told you the story.
Oh yeah,
So
between milking
glad.
cows,
Yeah.
between milking cows, and he would talk, just stories, and you were talking about some things that you really can't put in a movie because it's hard, because it takes up a lot of time. He would talk about how stressful it was just to sit on the tarmac, sit on the runway, waiting for the order for the flare would go up for them to start taking off, and the mission would get scrubbed because of weather. And you
Yeah.
have all this nervous, and you're knowing you're going to die, and then to know, well, gosh, this mission got scrubbed. I'm just going to have to do the same thing tomorrow.
Exactly. It's
And,
not that the mission is never going to happen.
oh yeah,
And
and the
and
25 mission, it didn't count. So you had all that nervous energy, all that fretting, all that worry, and all for nothing. Just have to do it all again tomorrow. So and you talk about the stories. What I heard and what I wrote about were like personal stories that told
right.
history. Mr. Miller does a great job, showing a lot of historical facts to tell a story. And I'm not saying one's better than the other, but they come from two different viewpoints. My granddad was just telling, his personal stories, and he was involved in three different very important historical missions. He was on the mission, the
Wow.
Black Thursday mission, where, he slept in the barracks by himself that night because he was the only pilot left in that hut.
That had made it.
In his
Yeah.
hut, he slept in the barracks by himself that night, and then he flew on the first mission that they were ordered to have a civilian target, and that was the order. And that was
Known as
new. They knew
Operation
they were
Gomorrah.
killing civilians. And then, of course, the third mission was when they ran into the 262 jets. And from a historical standpoint, that was so late in the war, and it didn't really make much difference. But I can remember him saying that was the first night that he actually went to bed thinking we're going to lose the war. What they saw
Because of
was
seeing the
okay.
technology
Yes.
of these new jets.
And if they get enough of
Yeah.
these, we're doomed. So,
Yeah.
they went to bed that night scared to death, even
Yeah.
though, they didn't have production, but they didn't know none of this in 43, 44. So,
Yeah, actually the production just wasn't going to hold
no.
for
But as
at
far
that
as they
point
knew,
we'd already weakened the German
yeah.
war machine to the point they couldn't bring too many of those jets out. Otherwise, it could have had a completely different outcome.
Oh, yeah. And,
Yeah. And just kind of going back to this trailer for Masters of the Air, they shows them preparing for. I think they called it the largest sortie that they were ever. I don't know if you know the specifics of that mission, but what it was called, and what year that happened. It will be interesting to watch the film and kind of get a little more details. But at the very least, the trailer shows that we're going to see some of those epic missions, like you're talking about. Black Thursday, Operation Gomorrah. Those were epic missions that you wrote about in your book, and so, of course, we're going to see some of those in the film as well. And we did talk a little bit related to the last trailer about how all of the actors almost entirely were not known. Of course, most of them are known today. They got a lot of opportunities from being in the film. And now a couple of the actors or an actress from this film, people probably are recognizing, because since the film was made, they went on to make some other films. I know that the primary actor, Austin
Butler. Yep.
Butler, thank you.
Yes.
I know his first name.
And
Austin Butler went on to play Elvis, and he got awards for that. And so it looks like they went out and got an A-list actor, an award-winning actor for their film. But the truth is that they actually had found him before he became so well-known.
Yes.
And as you say it, they lucked out. I'm going to be honest. I'm just going to be honest here. When I saw the trailer, the first trailer, and I saw that he was playing that role, a part of me was like, it's Elvis.
Okay.
I'm just, because that's the reaction I have when I see somebody who's, I've seen in another role. And I'm sure I'm not going to have a problem seeing him in this new role. But that was my initial reaction, was like, oh, they went and got an A-list actor for this.
Yeah.
But the truth is that it just took them a little longer. Of course, when you're making a $250 million budgeted series, you're going to take a little more time than probably it took them to turn around the other movie he was in. And of course, the young woman, I don't remember her name.
She
plays
started
his
in
girlfriend.
1883. Yeah.
Right. Marge is the name of the character she plays, the girlfriend of Austin's character. Now I can't think of his name. Oh well, the character's name. Do you remember the
Major Clavin?
Clavin.
And then, of course, his girlfriend's Marge. Of course, he ends up marrying her in real life, and she becomes
I
Marge
love it.
Clavin.
Oh, I love it. And you see in his bunk, he's got. I saw a picture of the actual Clavin Captain Clavin, and he had a picture of Marge in his bunk. And this young woman that they've selected to play her looks so much like her, that I think that they probably did the same thing they did before, which I love, is that they actually made an effort for the actors to actually look like the people that they're playing. So I think that we can appreciate that they've done that again with Masters of the Air. So
awesome.
It's nice to watch it and think, oh, I'm actually sort of kind of watching history and happening. I think we should feel that way when we're watching these films, like we're watching history, we're witnessing history, because what it does in the end is helps us appreciate history. So
yeah, and kudos to Apple TV, and also HBO before them on spending and taking that bigger risk to preserve history. I remember watching interviews with Steven Spielberg. He was talking about one of the reasons he did Schindler's List. Of course, it made money and it was a big hit. But, ultimately in the back of his mind, he wanted to preserve history and he wanted to preserve these stories. When I first talked to you the only intention I ever had on writing a book was I just wanted to preserve the stories for my kids and grandkids, great grandkids coming up, because I didn't want them to just kind of fade away in history. And I think when
that's the reason why I started my publishing company, Triumph Press. It's the reason why I publish nonfiction, or I have some children's books or historical fiction I don't have a problem with, as long as they're really accurate to the time. But that's just because I actually think all of us have stories from our lives that are really important, that will affect and help and inspire others. And so I guess this is kind of a little off topic, but very much on topic. I'll just take a chance to tell everybody who's watching this to look at your life and what have you experienced, or what time period did you live through, and what do you have to share and teach the next generation? Because that's ultimately what this is all about. And I think that's a good segue into extending an invitation to everyone, because this is our first official show with Masters of the Air Talks. And we'll probably put it up so that if anybody who comes to the channel and wants to know what it's about, they'll get to see this show. That could change, but for now, that's my plan. So what we want to do is invite you to join us every Saturday during the showing of this series, Masters of the Air, which will be released. A new episode will be released every Friday. My understanding is on the 26th, they're actually going to show the first 2 episodes.
Yep. From what they've said so far, yeah.
Yes. So the next morning on Saturday, starting at 10 a.m. Eastern, so 9 Central, 8 Mountain, and 7 Pacific. So find your time zone. We'll be on here with a live show. And the whole idea is to create an opportunity for everyone to come together and just talk about it. We want to hear your thoughts on this movie. We want to hear from any of you that have a loved one, a father, a grandfather, an uncle, a great uncle that fought in the war, that you've got a little something to share. And we'll be doing these live shows throughout the series, and then we'll probably continue them. Ideally, we'll build a nice community that loves to come together and talk about it. So if you haven't, be sure to subscribe to this channel, because when you do, you'll get notification of when the next show is coming up. You'll get a countdown. And also, if you would like to come on the show and actually be seen right here with us, we can have multiple guests come into the virtual studio. And if you want to be a part of our show in that way, all you need to do is go to mastersoftheairtalks.com. That will take you to a web page where you can fill out a form and communicate with us and let us know that you're interested in being a part of it in that way. So.
And I'll talk about a little bit what we got planned for later on in the weeks. Now, one thing, even if you don't want to come on the show, leave comments or leave questions.
Yes.
Don't forget, because we'll try to address some of those. Actually, great topic.
We'll have it so a lot of the comments are visible to everybody, and then we can all talk
address
about
everybody, or they later on they think of something, and I do that all the time.
Yeah.
But later on in the week, what we're going to do is have more of a set show where we'll have guests on, and that's where we'll do that kind of more of a standard show, Q&A. Bringing up different topics that maybe the miniseries brings up that particular episode. Maybe reference it back to books, either Masters of the Air or maybe other historical books and stuff. So if you're a museum curator, author of a military type book, definitely, check us out. drop us a note.
We'll be looking for you. We'll be reaching out to you. And so
Yeah.
all of those who are watching the show, we're going to be working to really bring some very intelligent, expert, interesting people to come and talk about these topics. And if you have a topic idea, like I said, go to our website and give us an idea if you think that there's something we should discuss that you'd like to see shared. And it's all about ensuring that we're talking about and remembering and preserving this history and appreciating those that have sacrificed so much for the freedom of the world.
Yes. Because these men, I mean, they paid a price that for some of them affected the rest of their lives. And a lot of them were very quiet about it. As I talk a lot about in my book, and we have other viewers out there that have family members that they discover after they're gone, after they've left this world, what kind of a war hero they were when they find that shoebox full of medals. And but there was a reason why those men didn't talk about it.
And that kind of just riffing here, just off the top of my head with you saying that, we talk about having guests on. I would love to just feature people coming on and talking about their loved one, their ancestor that made such a sacrifice. If you'd like to come on and pay honor to someone in your family, maybe who didn't talk much about it, or like Captain Jimmy Galloway, who finally started talking about it later in his life, to John, we'd love to share those stories too. So
we got
look around, find your pictures, gather them up, and come and share them.
Yeah, we got this huge opportunity because when Band of Brothers came out, YouTube, all this stuff wasn't really around the communities and easy access. So, we got a unique opportunity to talk in a community of like-minded people that enjoy something or have something they enjoy in common. So, look forward to some interesting conversations. And as Melanie knows, I love hearing stories. I love stories.
It's all about stories, really.
Yeah. That's a good title. All about stories. All about the story. Yeah.
It's all about some great stories. We look forward to getting to know those of you that decide to participate with us, and like I said, build a community, become neighbors, as we have something in common. We kind of become our own little band of brothers and sisters that honor our heroes. So with that, please be sure to subscribe, like this show. It will help others people to have it pop up on their channels, their YouTube homepages, and discover what we're talking about here and join us. And so we sure appreciate your help with that. Share it with anyone you know might be interested. And we'll see you on the next live.
Godspeed next time.